Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. I'm standing outside the old Scottish Parliament. There's a late 17th century building. It's both the House of Commons and the House of Lords met here. And prior to that, Scotland's Parliament had been unicameral, as in only one chamber, Commons and Lords together. It wasn't quite on the same model as the English. Anyhow, so since Scotland was an independent country, well, since it united in the Dark Ages, roughly the 9th century AD, Dalriada and Scotia united, it had parliaments which met from time to time when the king summoned them. Remember that the ancient capital of Scotland was Dunfermline, not Edinburgh. So it seemed odd to me that they would shift the capital here to Eden Law, or Dunedin as it's sometimes called, because they're moving it closer to their main enemy, because they often went to war against England. And Dunfermline was at least in Fife, a little bit inland, so that bit further north. I know Edinburgh is inland as well, because of course Leith was a separate town till about 1920. That's the port of Edinburgh. So we're about 5 miles inland here, and up a fairly steep hill. So that's the Parliament building. But when Cromwell took over, he created the Commonwealth of Great Britain and Ireland because it was a new state. They didn't call it a republic. It wasn't a kingdom, so what were they going to call it? They called it a Commonwealth. So there was one parliament in London for Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England, but it didn't last very long. And Cromwell's title, he styled himself Lord Protector, because various times when there'd been a regent, as in someone governing in place of the king, because the king was an infant, there had been a regent, or the regent had taken the title Lord Protector of the realm. And so Cromwell was in London, a very long way from Scotland. Remember, it was a very long journey. Riding hell for leather would take 3 days from London to Edinburgh in good weather. Because, for example, when Elizabeth I died at Richmond Palace, the messenger that March, so reasonable weather, he rode up to Edinburgh, to Holyrood House, to inform King James VI of Scots that he was also the King James I of England, and that took 3 days. So Exchequer, that's where it's based. Look at that, the lion and the unicorn up high, those golden feathers, and then the crest, which is a knight's helmet in the middle, with a red lion above it holding a scepter and a mace. And there's Honi soit qui mal y pense, the motto of the Order of the Garter, Dieu est mon droit. Beside the unicorn's feet, there's the thistle of Scotland. Beside the lion's feet, there's the red rose of England. So, sorry, there you are, seeing it. But anyway, so back to here. So because it was a very long way away, Oliver Cromwell decided he needed to have a governor here in Scotland. So he released a royalist general from prison, George Monk. It was just after the English Civil War. Cromwell was a parliamentarian, and Monk had been a royalist. King Charles I had been defeated and executed. His son Charles II was in exile in the Netherlands. So George Monk was paroled, saying, okay, I fought for the king, we lost, I accept that, accept the new dispensation, I will be loyal to Cromwell, and indeed he was. So he fought in Ireland because most of us were royalists there, and we were defeated. So then Monk was sent to Scotland as governor of Scotland, because it took quite a long time for messages to get from Edinburgh to London and back again. You know, in bad weather, could be a couple of weeks. So that's why Cromwell needed someone on the ground to make urgent decisions faster. Not everything could be referred to London in those days, owing to slow communications. Anyway, so Cromwell died. His son Richard Cromwell, Tumbledown Dick, ruled for a year. He wasn't politically ambitious, didn't have the respect of the army. He was persuaded to resign after a year. George Monk became Lord Protector, and then he brought back Charles II in 1660. So this parliament was built then, because remember, Edinburgh had been sacked by Cromwell in 1650 because they brought back Charles II when he promised no more prayer book and accept the Presbyterian constitution of the Church of Scotland. Well, people were very foolish to trust him. Anyhow, so the Scottish Parliament carried on meeting. Remember, only men who owned a very large amount of property were allowed to vote, and only men who were extraordinarily wealthy were allowed to be elected to Parliament. Of course, there were peers, people who inherited the title Lord, Viscount, Earl, Marquess, Duke. These are noble titles, from a father to the eldest son. And so in Scotland at the time, there would have been somewhere over 1 million people. How many lords would there have been? Not a lot, 100 tops. So the top aristocrats who'd owned huge amounts of farmland, they got to be here automatically. The other people here tended to be major landowners as well, just they didn't have a title like Lord, or else very successful merchants. So that was the English, that was the Scots Parliament. Then in the early century was the Darien venture, Darien and Panama. Because remember, Scotland and England being separate kingdoms, they could have separate policies to some extent, separate colonies. The colonies in the New World were for England and Wales, not for Scotland or indeed for us in Ireland. Although a few Irish and Scots people went to those colonies. But Scotland had its own colony in Darien, and so much of the country's money was invested there, it's proved to be very unwise and was a complete flop, trying to sell like woolen garments to people in a tropical zone. So Scotland lost so much of her national wealth. There was a proposal to have an Act of Union to combine the Parliament of Wales and England with the Parliament of Scotland, and indeed here it was passed. I think it was Robert Burns wrote about 80 years later, it was bought and sold for English gold, and outside there was a crowd protesting saying, "No union, English dogs." So there's a bit of Anglophobia. Now, there might be decent arguments against Scotland uniting with England, but I think saying that the English are dogs is not one of them. Anyway, it was passed. What did public opinion make of it? Well, we don't know. There were no surveys, so was it an elite consensus this should happen? Again, we're not sure. But some leading Scotsmen openly opposed it, and of course they were allowed to do so. But that was passed, and it wasn't accepted for a long time. Scotland and England had separate currencies for some time afterwards. Only gradually they all adopted the pound sterling. But people still did use the pound Scots as a unit of account, because some people found it difficult to convert in their minds to the new system. But there were guarantees for Scotland to have some degree of autonomy, and England and Wales didn't have to copy Scotland. Scotland was not obliged to copy England and Wales. So Scotland retains a separate system of education, a separate church from England and Wales, even though England and Wales got a much bigger population and larger territory. So they did not insist on uniformity. Obviously these days there's devolution. The Scottish Parliament came back after a hiatus of 292 years. What else apart from that? So even in that era of full union, where there was no devolution, Scotland was a special region of the United Kingdom and could do things a little bit different. So here it was. These are turned into law courts later on. So that's enough about the history of the Scots Parliament. The new one is down the hill at the foot of Holyrood House, but that'll be another video.